how nature really inspires you, right? I think we
Yeah.
really need to talk about it. The reason being, just yesterday in
Yeah.
the regular Tuesday sessions that we have, right? The topic that we had was what inspires you, and where do you find or seek inspiration from?
Yeah.
And one of the things that really came up was nature,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
it became a huge discussion. All of us had so much to say about, how every time we are stressed, when things are difficult, nature is one space that we run to looking for inspiration
Yeah.
and just connection. And sometimes for me, nature is just proof of God's existence. At least that's the way I
Yeah.
look at it. And so when I
Yeah.
look at all these amazing things that around in nature, they're always a reminder of, how powerful God can be, right? And
Mm.
how
Mm.
miraculous, like, his actions can be.
Mm.
So
Mm.
we had a lot of discussion around all of that. And so that connects so much to what you were talking about, right? And I'd love to,
Mm.
hear that. And maybe even those who are
Yeah.
listening would, I'm pretty sure, love to hear about your experiences in this small, in the middle of nowhere in France, in that beautiful
My little
looking.
hiding place. Yeah, well, actually, so what it's funny that you say that, that magical thing, right?
Mm,
Because so I was just telling you we have bees and we lost a beehive this winter,
yeah.
and every time we lose a beehive, it's like it's a real mourning process, right? Because first of all, because bees are just incredible creatures,
Absolutely.
and the way they live, the way they cooperate, the way they have, it's not for no reason that we say the hive mind, right?
Mm,
It's a whole. And for me, it's a real example of, although being that industrious is not really my way of being, but the way of being part of a whole
yeah.
is for me very inspiring. And so we lost a hive, and it's very often because we live in the countryside and there's lots of pesticides around, lots of agriculture, and and
Mm,
so we lose a beehive because they have a neurological disease because of the pesticides, or so we're so sad when that happens.
yeah.
And so a few days ago, we discovered that actually in the old hive that died a month and a half ago, that we left there, a new colony has moved in. So there's a colony that just, and they're super industrious. And so I was talking about that with my partner, Michelle, and he was, it's his bees, like his bees, but he's really, this
Yeah.
is the thing that connects him with the land we live on. And so he was so depressed over the loss. And then when this happened, I could just see, like, life came back to him. Like,
Yeah.
we have a new colony moved in. And he said to me, that's really magical. He said, that's really a wonder. I hear so many beekeepers who are trying to catch colonies, and they don't succeed. And here we are doing nothing, and a colony moved in. It's a wonder. It's a miracle. Do you even realize it's a miracle? And I said, and I really feel that, I said, oh, believe me, I do realize that that's a
Yeah.
miracle, right?
Yeah.
And these miracles are out there every day,
Mm,
every day. And so for me, nature and being able to just go out in the garden,
mm,
try to let nature do its thing, so interfere as little as possible, right? At the moment, our field is full of little wild orchids, all tiny
oh,
little purple orchids, and it's really beautiful in this time of year. And so what I do is I just go in the field and I try to find myself a place where I'm not sitting on an orchid. And then I sit down and I just become completely quiet, and I just watch around, and you see all these little pollinators, all these little insects that
um,
go into the flowers, and not just orchids, also buttercups, and it's full of little flowers. And they go into the flowers and they get their pollen and they get their nectar and they get, they do that work. And I watch that and I feel like it's really magical. If
yeah.
there's magic in this world, it
Yeah.
is in this, just the way things are naturally, without our interference, just the nature of things and the way everything is interconnected. And for me, that's really the inspiration in my life at the moment. And it's interesting because I often think about, you know, in terms of empathy, like how does it relate? And I remember that we started, when COVID just started, we started with this course, online empathy course that we gave. And we had Lidewij Kutty in our program. And she's working with empathy in museums, and, you know, she has, and so she came and did the course with us, and she came in with the question, is it possible to empathize with an object? And that question just stuck with me. And I thought, you know, so it's so interesting to think, especially nowadays, when we think of what's happening in the world, like, can we enlarge that empathy towards objects, or at least towards nature, towards the natural world, right? Is there a possibility to empathize with the natural world? And what does that then really mean? Like, what's the point of doing that type of thing? And so for me, when I sit in nature and I just observe, and I feel privileged to be able to observe all of that, and to be part of that, right? And to hear the birds, and to hear the insects, and to watch and to feel the sun. And I think, yeah, I definitely think that there's a possibility to empathize with nature, with animals, but also just with beings in this world. So even a rock, like if you observe a rock that has been there for who knows how long, that has been shaping its form for who knows how long, right? And you try and place yourself into the being of that rock. Like, what's this rock doing here? You know, what is the purpose of this rock in this place? And then it's not about trying to become the rock, trying to, you know, see the world from the point of view of the rock, trying to, you know, all these things that we say
of the rock.
Exactly. The things we say when we say empathizing, right? But it is, and I think that is, again and again, comes back to me as one of the main consequences of empathizing, is it creates a connection with another being. And so there is a connection between who I am, whomever I am, right, and this natural world. And that is just, it is so delicious to be part of it. I don't know. It's like eating ice cream. It's magic. It's magic. It's the magic of the bees moving in. It's the magic of the insects in the flowers. And also, when we say, oh, we have to protect the honeybees because the honeybees are starving. And yes, that's true. But don't forget the honeybees. We are abusing the honeybees in this world. You know, we're using them to grab their honey. That's why we're interested in the honeybees. And now we're interested in the honeybees because they have to pollinize our trees and our plants and but there's so many more pollinating insects out there, and we don't even know their names, and we don't know nothing about them. We hardly recognize them when we see them, right? And they're all part of this being.
For me, when, you know, empathizing with an object is a reality. I mean, we are capable of empathizing with, and I also sense, I don't know, but then this is just something that I sense, that people who generally find it easier to empathize with people will also find it easier to empathize, be it with nature, be it with objects, with anything of that sort. I just sense that. Because you're so used to kind of, you know, thinking, or like, kind of putting your perspectives aside, and, you know, just that curiosity of like, oh, what is this person in front of me saying? What is their life like, right? And so you kind of have that same curiosity kind of ignited anytime you see an object or anything of that sort, right? And for me, what it does for me, at least nature and all of that, it just again, it just connects me deeper to my faith, in the sense that through that object, I'm also connecting with the one who created that object, or, you know,
Yeah.
It can be anything. Like, for example, I remember reading about humanization, how, generally, like, for example, the cloth, this cloth that I'm wearing, this cloth that I'm wearing, like, so many people would have put in effort so that it finally is, I'm wearing it today, right? And so an exercise in humanization that I read somewhere was about how anytime you're using something new, like, for example, a pen, or your dress, or whatever, just thinking back to how many people would have spent their time and effort on creating it, right? And then this becomes not just some dress. It becomes something that's received the love and care of so many people as it came through its journey to finally reach me. And so, when you look at that, and when you I think humanization is very, very closely connected to empathy, and it is a huge part of empathy. I mean, instead of looking at other people as just some random being, who's there, you look at them as, oh, that's a person with feelings, with dreams, with everything that I have, like with experiences like mine, and, maybe very different from mine. But at the end of it, they go through the same sort of emotions that I go through. So having that is basically what humanization. You're humanizing that object or that person, right? And even with nature, that's what happens when you are able to look at a hill or a mountain and kind of just think back to the number of people who would have kind of tread on that particular hill or whatever, like how, like you said, the rock, God knows since when it's been lying around there, right? I mean, when you just take that extra moment to kind of deepen or just reflect on the general existence of that one thing, I think, and just, it helps you connect with, that object in so many different levels, not just to that object per se, but also to everyone and everything that would have touched that object or, been associated with that object in its, existence. Yeah.
It's interesting because I think that's also where the overwhelm of empathy can come in. Is that so? For instance, when you talk about your clothing, when I love it how you say, the love and the care that people put in that piece of clothing. But a lot of our clothing has been made through extreme suffering, right? People doing very hard work in very harsh circumstances, underpaid. So there's also a lot of suffering always. When I think of clothing, I think of that. And so if you, that type of connection through your objects with the world around you, I think can also become really overwhelming. How to stay connected and yet be able to handle that overwhelm that comes with the realization of that suffering.
I think it's these sort of realizations. Like, for example, I could have used any other example as well. Like, it could be the building that I'm sitting right now. It could be a lot of things. But like you said, it's a reality. Like, the whole fashion industry and the sort of harm that it creates in the lives of so many people, and the environment as well. It's these sort of realizations or reflections that then push us to live more in a more sustainable way, right? It pushes us to kind of take positive steps as to be more conscious about what is it that I'm wearing. Do I own more clothes than I should, right? And so a lot of these things. So I think in a way, having that overwhelm now and then is, at least in this sense, a good thing, because it also pushes you towards the right direction. It kind of makes you think about things that you otherwise wouldn't think about. But in a general sense, I think the whole idea of like, it's very real, like, the whole overwhelm around empathy, because in so many of the sessions, participants keep asking, like, isn't it hard to practice empathy? Isn't it too painful to practice empathy, right? And I always go back and I always tell them about Carl Rogers and his definition of empathy, which kind of so beautifully talks about self-other differentiation along with all the other aspects of empathy, right? I mean, at least in my personal practice of empathy, one thing that has helped me manage that overwhelm is repeatedly letting myself know, or having that self-talk, where I'm telling myself, listen, like, we are going to empathize with this person, but know that that person's world is that person's world, and your world is distinct and separate from it. And sometimes this may seem like, is it really empathy then? Because, you're kind of detaching yourself. But I think this level, or at least a balanced form of detachment, is essential in the practice of empathy, because otherwise compassion fatigue, or call it like emotional contagion, all these sort of things kind of creep in, and then it becomes a huge overwhelm, and you kind of then tend to think of empathy as something negative. And my sister is a doctor, and I see it live in her practice, because I remember the first week that she joined, and she works with oncology patients, right, which is a very, very difficult department to be in. And I remember her first week, how she was crying on the third day after work because one of her patients passed away. And now that it's been like almost a year, the way she talks about her patients and the sort of things that go on, I mean, she's so detached from what's happening. And I think that sort of healthy detachment is more, I would say, a mechanism that helps us survive in these sort of circumstances, right? It is essential. But again, we also need to make sure that this detachment doesn't, completely take our empathy away. You really still need to kind of, know where to draw that line. I mean, where exactly does that balance lie?
I think a lot about this, right? And I'm not sure at all, really. Sometimes I think if it's that overwhelming, it's probably because the way we organize our work is not, it's not okay. It's not, because do we really, I also tell myself, okay, disconnect. This is not your issue. You're there to hold the space. That's what empathy is. We're holding the space, right? It doesn't have to become my problem. And yet I connect with it because I hold the space. So it's in my space, right? So it's not, it's not my space. I don't mean it's, but I'm touched by it. It's touching my being. And so I think that is part of the territory.
All right.
That being touched is part of the territory. And so that, yes, then the chance of overwhelm happens. And yes, one way of dealing with that is to take back. Take a step back, take yourself back from that and say, wait a moment, this is not yours, which is also really a reality. But I think what maybe comes with that type of overwhelm is a sort of sentimentalism of the emotional, the effects of the emotional contagion, where you feel like you need to save the world. We really do not need to save the world. We really don't maybe even need to save ourselves. Let's just be. Let's start with just being and in connection with the rest. And so that since, I'm now so deeply, because of my nature, into that connection, I really wonder, do we need to disconnect when we empathize with others? Do we need to disconnect in order to prevent that overwhelm from happening? Or and is it maybe true that there's something in the system, like doctors, like specialists, like that, like working in an oncology department full time, right? It is really, you are constantly confronted with the nature of life, which is, being born, if you're lucky, growing up, getting sick and dying. It's what the nature of life is, like everything does. It's you plant it, you sow a seed, it comes up, it grows, it flowers, it produces fruit, it drops the fruit, and it dies off. It's what we do, right? So is it really necessary in empathy to prevent the overwhelm, to disconnect? Is there something in the system that we, in our own personal lives, need to look at really carefully and say, hey, without saying you have to empathize all the time, because that's no, I don't believe that we need to empathize all the time. I don't think it's healthy. I don't think it's necessary. I think empathizing is really, it's really putting an effort in, right? And so you use it there where it's needed. And so maybe we really need to look also at where is it needed. And also to be able to see the beauty in the decay. like to
Mm.
see the beauty. I was confronted with death early in my life, right? And I really, really, when I have people around me going through phases where brothers or sisters die or parents die, or there's that immense sadness around it,
Yeah.
which is natural. We're losing something important in our life. But I also find that it's one of the most touching periods, because all the masks fall off, all the things that are so important in daily life, they're all not important in that moment of dying. And there's real beauty in being able to be with somebody while they are dying, being able to hold the space for somebody to transition to whatever death is, right? And so
Now that you mention, like, this aspect of natural decay, that we just have to accept reality, I think term or a better way of looking at it would also possibly be sharing, or just knowing that a higher power is with you in everything you do, because that just takes away some of the pressure that's on you to handle everything, right? I mean, and that's where I think having faith in spirituality, it's so critical to human life. And I marvel at people who manage to survive and live on a day-to-day basis without such faith, or something like that, because then life would be so much more difficult. Because right now, like, anytime I am facing situations, or which are very, very difficult, and even if I'm empathizing with someone who's going through a very, very difficult phase, I know that it's not all on me to kind of and even when I'm practicing healthy detachment, maybe that is a part of the entire, like, the dynamics with that person I'm empathizing with being taken care of by a higher power who is kind of holding me. And just knowing that sometimes just surrendering myself completely to that higher being, to God or whoever that is what gives me the strength and the courage to kind of deal with any overwhelm that comes my way.
yeah. But so many people don't have that way of
Yeah.
connecting, right? I'm also not, there's no God in my worldview. Well, there's many gods in my worldview, but there's not, I don't have your devotion the way
Yeah.
you have. That's not my,
Yeah.
and so I think, for me, it's that interconnection, maybe that
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
source, right? When I talk about the
Yeah.
source,
The
it's
source and
maybe that.
nature, and yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But so maybe that's really what it is to, instead of disconnecting
Mm.
from the suffering that we see in the world,
Yeah.
is to maybe connecting that suffering to whatever your source is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that you balance, that you find a balance in,
Yeah.
there is all of this, and it is allowed to be, it
Yeah.
is what it is. It's not just being able to observe it, to hold the space for it,
Yeah.
right? And to connect it to the whole. You know what, Rasha, I would really like to hear from you
Yeah.
is, why do we need to empathize? Why? What's all this point about empathizing all the time? Do you want to speak to that?
That is essential because of my faith again. I again connected back to my faith, because being because I believe that God put me on earth for a reason, right? And I also believe that one day I'm going to meet him and I'm going to be answerable to him, about all the things that I did in this world. And so that kind of gives me a good enough reason to kind of behave, to empathize, to be compassionate to the people around me, and, to be nice and kind. So that is there. That is part of, like, or a huge part of, what gives me purpose in the work that I do, I think. And which is why I'm more curious to know, like, how then would you kind of why would you practice empathy? Because you did say, but again, no much of a difference. I think the source that you talk about is kind of like, the way I believe in God, right? Not a lot of difference there. But yeah, like, I'd still love to hear what you have to say on this.
Yeah. Yeah, I question this. I question this again and again and again.
Yeah.
Right? Every few months, I come back to this question: is it really necessary to empathize?
Oh my God, hearing it from
Is
you,
it really?
the goddess of empathy.
Oh no, 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 no. Thank you, but no, no, no,
Yeah.
thanks. Is it really necessary? So there's all sorts of cognition, thoughts, and yeah, because blah, and it helps, and this, and that, and it connects, and that. And then I also have this very private, I've never said this before. It's as you say, you're in the world with some sort of purpose, right?
Yeah.
And I think that empathy between human beings, between humans and animals, between animals and the plants they eat, empathy, I think, is one of the elixirs of life. And it's almost like, so when I question that again and again, it's almost like this is a message. Empathy is a message, something around empathy, I'm not even sure what it is, that needs to be carried on through the generations. It's like, it's part of life. That's what I feel. It's very intuitive. Huh? Empathy is part of nature, is part of life, is part of what helps us to coexist in the world.
Yeah, it's the root of connection, right? It's at the core of connection.
Or it's a practice of connection, or, you know, but when I really question myself and I really think, you know, what am I doing with my life? Am I really doing this with my life? You know,
it's not like we make a lot.
No, that way, no, it's not like we're going to become rich with this. No, sorry.
Exactly.
No, but it's a message, and apparently I'm a messenger, and it has, and it's not like, don't take it as, oh, I'm the prophet of empathy, I'm the queen of empathy. No. It's just that something that is part of my passion, right, of whatever I am doing in this world, that is part of not just me, it's just part of life, and it chose to put its seed into my little individual, though, as a messenger of that. How do we do this? How do we do this? How do we do this? And so I feel very dedicated to, you know, just all I need to do in my life now is I got born with it, I developed it, I try and work it in the world. And when I die, you know, I hope to pass it on. Like, I hope there's somebody else, and there's plenty now. I think that's the good news of empathy having such a popularity, is that many people are touched for some reason by the importance of this concept at the moment. And that's, I think, a great thing. Absolutely. And so if we just carry it on and we pass it on through the generations so that it doesn't get lost, so that it's not becoming a lost art of humanity, but it's something, a tradition that we keep alive in order to be able to live, survive, stand each other. I mean, yeah, but it's really, I really feel that it's just an intuition. Like, it's not me choosing empathy, it's empathy choosing me. It's not me having importance in all of this. It's just that there is empathy, and can I find a way to express it in order to carry it on? Yeah,
that's so beautiful.
And I think I do. I think that's also now slowly I start seeing in my own little circles, in the people around me, I start seeing that what I try to offer is really beneficial, you know, to people. And they do feel that connection, and they do feel the authenticity of my attention. They do feel that there's something true in what I'm trying to do, and it inspires. And I think that's, for me, like, that's a huge gift. Like, every time I think, am I going to do this work still? Then I think of that, and I think, just put it on a slow burner for a while, regroup, you know, catch your energy again, you know, find new ways of expressing it, and then keep going.
Wow, that's beautiful. So beautifully said. And in a sense, you're making me feel more selfish because I honestly got into this field because of selfish reasons, in a way, because I've personally experienced so much of lack of empathy, especially in the education system, and where you spend so many years just studying and all sorts of subjects and whatnot, and then you just come out, and connection or dealing with people is one thing you're not equipped to do when you actually enter into your adult life. And I always used to question that, and I think what pushed me towards like empathy and working in this domain is the lack of it that I personally experienced in my life, right? And that's what pushed me to kind of, do some work here, because I really don't want future generations or a lot of people going through the sort of, difficulties that I went through due to lack of empathy in the world.